Okay, President Joyce, it's 11 a.m. and we're all set.
All right, let's get started. And we'll now begin discussion with mailing A with staff member Melvin.
Excellent, thank you. Staff member Melvin. Is everybody ready? And this is mailing A. It's that time of year. This is our annual review for standards adopted by reference. So first I'd like to thank Compliance Officer Erin Richmond for her help in looking up all of the references for the CFRs and the items in USC. I don't think that the board needs to look at every single rule that we amended. Again, for the public's sake, though, everything that is bold and underlined is what is being proposed to be sent to the May rulemaking hearing to be permanently adopted during the June board meeting, and everything that has a yellow highlight, that's the rule number that was amended. I do want to scroll down to in Division 6 for definitions. There are a couple of rules in standards adopted by reference that need to be amended, but you sort of have competing rules happening here, so there won't be double filings necessarily. I just wanted to explain this. So depending on what happens later today with Division 183, if the board decides to send those proposed rules to rulemaking hearing, you all have proposed a new definition for compounding. So that's why I amended it here. So you're going to see amendments in both of those rule sets, but they will only be filed once. If the board does not send the new definition of compounding to rulemaking in Division 183, I will not send it proposed this way unless you all decide you want to do it that way. Did I make that worse? Same thing for Division 45. Let's look at that one. Just a moment. Right, so what I'm saying is we can't amend it and repeal it at the same time. It's either one or the other. So we aren't going to know until later this afternoon. So if for some reason drug compounding rules do not go to May rulemaking hearing, I will simply file these amendments to be updated for the standards adopted by reference. Yes, Board Member Smith.
Board member Pinito says she can't hear anything.
Oh, great. Thank you. We're still on mute. Board Member Richmond, can you hear us? I'm sorry, Staff Member Richmond.
Staff Member Richmond, I can hear you.
Okay. Board Member Pinito, can you please leave the Teams call and come back in? If she can hear me, or Board Member Smith, can you let her know? President Joyce, could you give us just a moment, please? Just we want to make sure that she can hear and be a part of this conversation. Okay, Board Member Pinito, how about now?
Yes, I can now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So all I did, just what you missed, just a slight recap. I'm just showing the rules that are proposed to be amended for standards adopted by reference that are also labeled Division 183. That's what I was discussing right now.
Okay, thank you.
You bet, thanks. Okay, so back to Division 45. So if again, depending on what you do in 183, this either goes away or it gets amended with the current standards adopted by reference. So those are the only two things I wanted to point out. So back to you, President Joyce, for discussion.
So, at this section, does anyone have anything they want to clarify? Is it pretty clear so far? Is there any clarification needed as far as what was just presented? We're good to go to move on.
Okay, so back to you for a motion to send that to rulemaking hearing.
Okay. Is there a motion to move to send OAR dash six, is there a motion to move to send OAR 855-006-005?
Oh, sorry, you missed a zero on that one.
Is there a motion to move to send OAR 855-006-0005, OAR 855-041-1046, OAR 855-041-1092, OAR 855-041-1145, OAR 855-041-7050, OAR 855-043-0545, OAR 855-043-0740, OAR 855-045-022, OAR 855-045-0200, OAR 855-045-0205, OAR 855-080-0020, OAR 855-080-0021, OAR 855-080-0022, OAR 855-080-0023, OAR 855-080-0024, OAR 855-080-0026, OAR 855-080-0028, OAR 855-080-0031, OAR 855-080-0065, OAR 855-080-0070, OAR 855-080-0075, OAR 855-080-0085, OAR 855-115-0130, OAR 855-120-0005, OAR 855-135-0001, OAR 855-139-0145, OAR 139-0350, OAR 855-139-0460, and OAR 855-141-0350 as proposed to the May 2026 rulemaking hearing.
So moved, Board Member Chin.
Is there a second?
Board Kirkbride, second.
Board President Joyce, yes. Board Vice President Kirkbride.
Yes.
Board Member Chin.
Yes.
Board Member Hall.
Yes.
Board Member Kroger.
Yes.
Board Member Patel.
Yes.
Board Member Pinedo.
Yes.
Board Member Smith.
Yes.
Motion passes. We will now review our annual board fees, mailing A1 with staff member Melvin.
All right, thank you, Staff Member Melvin. So for A1, this is pursuant to ORS 689-135, the board is tasked with reviewing fees annually. Pursuant to ORS 291050 and ORS 291060, a board cannot impose a new fee or increase a fee unless approved by the legislature as part of the legislative budget process or in accordance with the DAS 333 license fee increase process. Same reference, which is ORS 2910501A and 2910552C and D. For the board's consideration, we have drafted a motion to simply maintain the fee amounts in Division 110 as previously allocated. So for the mailing, I just added the statute and I added our current fees in Division 110. This doesn't go to rulemaking. However, the board does need to vote to maintain the fees as previously allocated. So back to you, President Joyce, for discussion.
Right. So this is just us to maintain, to record the fact that we are, maintaining fees. No changes. Does anyone have any comments or questions regarding this? Otherwise, we can go ahead and motion. Go ahead.
Member Hall. So this is new, right, to review annually because of, I mean, we had this big increase. It was because we weren't reviewing frequently.
I don't know if it wasn't, I don't know why that happened. I think there's a lot more to it than that. It was like, it wasn't. But I think that statute requires that you guys do it. It's a way to sort of remind ourselves that we should be looking at this, every year. So, one, you have to do it. And two, it's just sort of a good reminder as to like what the fees are and what, if they need to be looked at and changed or whatever every.
Member Hall, thank you. So what was it that we were talking about before when we were talking about increasing the fees that we hadn't done? Really?
Yeah.
I mean, so this is statutorily required. I'm not sure if you guys, because I wasn't the attorney at the time, so I'm not sure if this was specifically done or not. I don't think that it was. But this is sort of just like one way to sort of start that conversation, right? Like, of like, hey, these are what our fees are. Do we want to consider changing them, right? It's a good sort of catalyst, sort of like way to sort of have that conversation. But there was a lot more, I think, that went into the raising of the fees beyond just that.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is Board Member Chen. I think what we've had talked about building in were checks in February and checks in June that moving forward. So this is separate from there. This is a statutory thing that we just check off that kind of box, but there were plans in our agendas to look forward and work with the executive director and the CFO about where we're heading with our fees and moving forward in our agendas. That's my recollection.
Stefan Relevant, I agree with Board Member Chin. Does that answer your question, Board Member Hall? So during the budget cycle process for 27-29 budget, Executive Director Redden will come back, and this is when you will all help determine if there needs to be any adjustment or a fee increase that does have to go through the legislative process or the DAS 323 process. But we are not suggesting any increase or any changes in fees today.
Board President Joyce, I mean, seeing it here and bringing it to our awareness, because the board had gone several years without changing the fees. I believe, 10 years, without any fee increases. And like, what happened during that time? How come no one reviewed it? So
Sorry,
go ahead.
my apologies. This is Board Member Chen. I would not say no one reviewed it. I think that things occurred. Things were being reviewed. Decisions were made or not made that put us in a position, but we have discussed all of that. We've had all of those public discussions, and we have put into our plan on how we're moving forward.
This Board President Joyce, so, unfortunately it resulted in the 40% increase. And, I'm still gonna publicly state that it's unfair for technicians to be paying $140. That's a dramatic increase, for a technician. That's a personal statement, and I'm sure you'll maybe hear some sentiment in public about that. But, reviewing it here, having us see it, we're aware of it, we're cognizant. I know that, yes, there's a history of discussing fees in the past, but the fact that, they were allocated, the money was allocated differently, I guess, or and it resulted in no fee increases over a lengthy amount of time. It's still a challenge for me to understand how that could happen. I understand there's, COVID and a lot of different things, but, looking at other states and what they periodically adjust fees appropriately. Too late now, but going forward, I am glad that this is here and that we're able to see it. But some, you know, this is just maintaining the fees as they were adjusted recently. This is what we're pushing forward today. Any other comments or I propose this motion, move forward with this?
Board Member Kroger, the only maybe question I have, and this could really be off topic, so I apologize, is around like the NABP fees that are listed and not within statute, like, so this part of the statute, like the fees to be collected, are we collecting fees from NABP? Is the state or the board collecting fees from NABP? When they're paid to NABP for those examinations?
I don't think we get any of that money, right?
Yeah, staff member Melvin, no, it's directly to them.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then my.
Are we talking about, I'm sorry, are we talking about right here in 110-0005 fees?
Yeah, but back to the statute, the part that was highlighted, the beginning of each state fiscal year, the fees to be collected for. We aren't collecting fees for examinations or reexaminations. Therefore, do we need to list the fee prices that NABP collects? And the other question is UP, UMPJU, whatever you want to call that, that's another, that would need to be, if we do feel like the fees need to be listed, then it would also be, those new fees would need to be listed as well. And I know that's a little bit down the pipeline, but just something to be mindful of.
Yes, so, sorry, staff member Melvin. So Division 10, if and when that occurs and we start working that out with the board as far as sunsetting the old and implementing the new, Division 110 rules would need to be updated. That's a part of the process.
And I believe the fees that are collected, it specifically said to be paid to or something like that.
Yeah.
We looked at, okay.
So do we need to have that in rule?
So I think there was I can't remember exactly, there was I don't remember, I know I looked at it when we did it and I wrote it that way on purpose. I know that.
006 fees for that.
Yeah, okay, that's fine if this has already been reviewed, but I just wanted to point that out.
Yes, we teased it out. It used to be in a different rule and we created 0006 right here.
But I think if this is the statute that we're referencing, that the fees to be, yeah, it's fine.
All right, any further comments before a motion? Or- Can you hear us okay?
I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll go ahead and motion then. Is there a motion to move to maintain fee amounts as previously allocated in OAR 855-110-0003, OAR 855-110-0005, OAR 855-110-0006, OAR 855-110-0007, OAR 855-110-0010, and OAR 855-110-0015.
Board Member Kirkbride.
Is there a second?
Second board member Chin.
For President Joyce, yes. For Kirkbride,
Yes.
Former Chin,
Yes.
Former Hall,
Yes.
Former Kruger,
Yes.
Former Patel,
Yes.
Former Pinedo,
Yes.
Former Smith.
Yes.
Motion passes. Okay. So it is 11:20.
Yeah, I think if, sorry, staff member Melvin, I think if we want to just move to mailing C.
Okay, best practices? Is that where
Yes.
we're gonna go?
Yep,
Okay,
that's just a quick conversation.
gotcha. So yeah, let's go ahead and discuss board best practices survey, mailing C with staff member Melvin. Thank you.
Thank you. So in the mailing, I added the information about the board best practices survey. It's that time of year again where the board will receive the survey in May, and then the data from the survey will be brought back to the board during the June business meeting. So the Oregon legislature mandated that members of boards and commissions complete this annual self-evaluation to review adherence to recognized governance best practices. This talks about the purpose, the 15 questions, and you will be ranking yourselves for the calendar year of 2025. And it is a mandatory survey. We just like to point that out. And the results of the survey, again, are presented to you and then added to the annual performance progress report that is due to the legislature later in October. So this is just more of the FAQ that you've seen before and what it is and what it's about and who's impacted. Again, you need to just think of it as your report card. I'm going to scroll down to this FAQ. I just wanted to see if the board was able to review this before the meeting, if you had any questions. Again, in number 2, that did not occur for the ED because we had some turnover. So Gary, Executive Director Runyon, will have his performance review coming up. So you will rank on that the next time you do this. So President Joyce, I'm just going to turn it back to you to see if the board has any questions about the survey or the questions or the data that we're collecting.
Yeah, let's go around. Board Member Kirkbride, do you have any questions regarding this section?
No, I did not have any question. I just, one thing that kind of stood out was the, right here, that's being shown right now is the kind of bump up in the, following best practices. So we had a little bump up from 24 to 25, which is great. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Patel, looking at the data.
I remember Patel, have nothing to add.
Board Member Smith, anything to add or nothing to add? Clarify. Okay. Board Member Kroger,
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Board Member Chen,
Number 10, looking forward to a bigger bump.
Board Member Hall.
Nothing to add.
And Board Member Pinheiro.
Board Member Pinheiro, nothing to add.
Right, thank you. Back to you, Board Member Melvin. Staff Member Melvin.
Thank you for that. We appreciate it. The goal, again, if I didn't say, is at 100%. So we hope to see that bump as well. Thank you for your attention on that matter. With that in mind, we still have some time. So if Executive Director Runyon is ready, I believe we could review mailing D regarding the KPMs. That sounds agreeable.
Gary, are you ready to start that conversation? Okay, yeah, we're gonna go ahead and discuss KPMs with Executive Director Runyon.
Executive Director Runyon. Good morning, everyone. I will try to make this discussion about KPMs as brief and painless and informative and meaningful as possible. See if I can effectively juggle all of those at one time. So this presentation is a presentation on the KPMs or key performance measures, the goal of introducing proposed changes for the board to motion on. But before we dive into specific amendments, I want to frame exactly why we're presenting this overhaul to begin with. So KPMs are the official metrics tracked by the legislature, the Legislative Fiscal Office, or LFO, and the Governor's Office to evaluate the operational health and efficiency of our agency. So they're a vital tool for transparency and proving to lawmakers and the public that we're effective stewards of resources that we've been granted. But these aren't just numbers on a page. For example, when I'm down in Salem, whether discussing our budget proposals or navigating bills through the legislative process, I frequently have to speak directly to these metrics. And the legislature looks at these KPMs from a 30,000-foot view, essentially to gauge how we're performing overall as an agency. So having appropriate metrics isn't just important for the board's evaluation of my performance, it's critical for the state's evaluation of the board's performance. So if our data paints an inaccurate or failing picture, it can impact or dictate whether certain requests get approved and to what extent. And denied requests may limit our service levels, which ultimately directly impacts our core mission to promote and protect public health, safety, and welfare. So that's the why. To drive meaningful improvement, our metrics must be grounded in reality. And right now, a few of our KPMs are muddled by confounding external factors. which I'll expound upon further in the presentation. And furthermore, we can't expect our staff to be motivated by or connected to performance goals that fall completely outside their direct control. So if a metric evaluates the behavior of an external facility rather than our internal processing capacity, for example, it ceases to be a metric of our performance. So by refining these KPMs, we're ensuring that our data accurately reflects our true operational efficiency, giving the legislature a transparent look at our work and providing our staff with clear, achievable targets that they can actually work towards and control. And of course, as always, I'll read the mission statement. The Oregon Board of Pharmacy serves to promote and protect public health, safety, and welfare by ensuring high standards in practice of pharmacy and through effective regulation of the manufacture and distribution of drugs. So again, to understand why we're evaluating these metrics today, we have to look at the statewide framework under ORS 291.110. Tracking key performance measures is actually a statutory requirement. And again, it's used by the governor and the legislature to evaluate all of the state agencies. So more importantly here, the statute specifically dictates that these measures are assigned to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of our operations. That's exactly why we're proposing these changes today. And by fixing these structurally broken metrics, we're ensuring that our KPMs actually measure our true effectiveness rather than penalizing staff for external factors out of our control. And typically the process to change them is strict, though there are a list of exceptions. And the major changes occur in tandem with the budget development cycle. And since we're in an even numbered year now, this is the exact window to propose these modifications. And here's a general timeline that we're working with. So to restructure a metric that reflects a true operational efficiency, we must submit our request to the state's KPM online system and notify our analysts at both the Chief Financial Office and the LFO by April 30th. And then those CFO and LFO analysts will then review our request, provide feedback by June 30th. And then finally, as staff member Melvin just mentioned, we have the accountability piece where every year we're required to submit an annual performance progress report by October 1st. And we can think of this as our public report card. So by taking time to refine these metrics now, we can help ensure the test that we're being graded on actually makes sense and reflects the vital work that the agency is doing. So starting with KPM number 1, the percent of inspected pharmacies that are in compliance annually. And my proposed action here is to delete the KPM. The rationale is pretty straightforward. This KPM measures independent behavior of regulated facilities, not necessarily the operational performance of the agency. While we certainly can support compliance through effective rule writing, outreach, and education, and providing up-to-date self-inspection forms, etc., whether a facility ultimately passes its inspection is entirely or almost entirely out of board control. And additionally, the exact definition of what constitutes being in compliance, quote unquote, is often highly debatable, making the data itself an unreliable benchmark for evaluating the agency. Because this metric measures external behavior and is muddled by subjective interpretations, I recommend its total removal. It brings us to KPM number 2, the percentage of individual and facility licenses issued within 30 days. Here I'm proposing to replace this KPM with a much more precise metric. The percentage of licenses issued within 30 days of receiving a complete application. Furthermore, there might be an opportunity to further stipulate that the application is received within 30 days, it's complete, and it does not require board review. Checked with licensing director Hennigan, and we do have the ability to stratify that data to capture those exceptions. So that might be an option moving forward to add that. It's not on the slide, it's something that we discussed after this presentation is put together. So we're recommending this change because the current wording unfairly penalizes our staff for or our staff for delays outside of their control. First, we frequently receive applications missing required documentation, which necessitates weeks and weeks of back and forth communication just to get a complete file. And then second, if a complex application requires compliance or case review, it's structurally bound, of course, to our bi-monthly board meeting schedule, making a 30-day turnaround quite literally impossible. So by amending the language here to match the standard used by their health regulatory boards, we remove those external constraints and ensure this metric accurately reflects our staff's true operational efficiency and processing capacity. And this is KPM 3 out of 6. This is the last one that we're recommending modifications to. The remaining 3, we don't have any for those. So finally, KPM number 3, the percent of pharmacies inspected every 2 years. So this is really complex. And I want to preface this by saying we don't need to necessarily agree on the exact language today, as I believe the LFO will undoubtedly have their own specific input on any recommendations I make to them, which I believe they're in the process of reading right now. So what I'm really looking for is simply a motion approving me to work with the LFO to submit these by the end of the month. So here's why this metric is broken, essentially. We're currently trying to force a biennial inspection cycle on annual reporting requirements, which is a statistical nightmare, as you might imagine. It's a bigger nightmare to have to try and explain this in the hot seat down at the legislature when there's a mismatch between all of these timelines and reporting cycles, et cetera. And because the state biennium ends on June 30th, right in the middle of our reporting year, the data pool is effectively reset to 0 mid-year, which makes it impossible to pull meaningful and accurate annual performance data. And furthermore, the rigid every 2 years language ignores the reality of biennial scheduling. Technically, a pharmacy could be inspected at the very beginning of one biennium and the very end of the next, which would represent a gap of nearly 4 years and still be fully compliant with the intent of being inspected every biennium, even though it completely falls outside the every 2 years increment. So my proposed solution here, or there are multiple proposed solutions, one of which would be to move to a rolling, say 30-month metric or 36-month metric. And moving to that rolling metric would eliminate the mid-year data reset with standardized reporting and give staff the administrative flexibility they need to coordinate complex out-of-state facility inspections without unnecessarily being penalized. Again, I just want a metric that we can objectively target that represents the good work we're doing inside the agency. So again, today I'm simply requesting a motion to approve me working with the LFO to submit these by the end of the month. And here we have KPM number 4, the average number of days to complete an investigation from complaint to board presentation. No recommended changes there. KPM 5, this is a statutory requirement, I believe, a requirement from the legislature rather, related to customer service. So no changes proposed to this one. KPM 6 that staff member Melvin just reviewed board best practices. No recommended changes to that either. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, President Joyce, to open it up for any questions.
President Joyce, let me go around. I mean, there's certainly some interesting topics here. Board Member Patel, I'll start with you.
KPM 1, right? It says percentage of inspected pharmacy that are in compliance annually. Then we only inspect in state pharmacy, right? We do not inspect out of state pharmacy. So it's like in your license, it will say like you have, let's say, 1,000 pharmacy, that's the license. You know, if you pull the data from the license, then it says like you have total 1,000 pharmacies, they're licensed with the Oregon Board of Pharmacy, but the in-state is only, let's say, probably 200 is left, I don't know, 200, 250 is left, so in-state is only 250, and then, you know what I mean? So it does not make sense, like how many license you have, then how many do we inspect? And then, I don't know, do you want to break down that we only, or you want to tell the legislator that we only inspect in-state pharmacy, we do not inspect out-of-state pharmacy? That's number one. And then 30 days, that's fine. And then percentage of pharmacy inspected every 2 years. So your proposal is percentage of pharmacy inspected annually or percentage of pharmacy not inspected at least every 2 years. So I don't. I wanted to separate. That's what I want to understand.
Executive
Why the change? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, Executive Director Runyon. So specifically on KPM3, and like I mentioned, I think there are a few different ways to go about it. My preference would be the rolling increment of, say, 36 months or so, because it gives us more administrative flexibility. There are ways that we could modify the language in such a way that reflects the change in the data from being cut off at the biennium. It's just more hassle in terms of tracking and reporting it. It's just not as clean. Whereas if we have a rolling increment, because I really think the intent here is to ensure that we don't have an extended period of time where we're not on site checking the compliance of the pharmacy, right? So regardless of where we are in the biennium, where we are in the year, there arguably shouldn't be a point in time where a pharmacy goes, let's say, 3 years without being inspected, given that leeway that they could be inspected at the beginning of one biennium and the end of another. So that's where that timeline kind of comes from. The reporting, the discussions about that, the tracking is just a lot easier if we have that rolling increment as opposed to trying to bisect the data at various points, report on it the previous year annually, and then because of the data essentially resets, it's harder to report as a percentage because that percentage of pharmacies that would be inspected would go back down to zero. So we
Okay.
can't average the two. So it's just a nightmare altogether. So we certainly could go about it as outlined in Proposition 1 there. I think it'd just be a lot cleaner, not only to track and report on, but to discuss when I'm down to legislature if we have that rolling increment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I can see that, like, if you have, I mean, you can inspect all the pharmacy as soon as you hit that end of the year, right? Like you can be, there is your compliance officer will work like 24 hours and still is not done. So I can see that. So no, I'm fine with the proposed, KPM. That's it.
Board Member Smith.
Board Member Smith, I think all the proposed changes make a lot of sense. And I don't really have any questions. I think for KPM number 3, I think the board is doing a really good job, and if there would be like the 36-month, I don't know if we can do that or that's something you can do, but if that would help you guys do your job better, I would be in favor of that. Thank you.
Kroger.
Board Member Kroger. Okay. So my understanding, I was just looking through the statutes a bit. The intent behind having these key performance metrics is to determine the efficiency and the effectiveness of the state agencies, correct? So, and I understand that we want this to be reflective of the great work that our staff does here in some ways, but I also think, with both of the changes proposed in the KPM 1 and the KPM 2, I do have concerns with those being removed from being tracked. And for KPM 1, I think it's really important that there is an understanding of how safe and compliant our pharmacists are throughout the state. And I don't think that pharmacies not being in compliance is necessarily a reflection of the board or the board staff. It is potentially a reflection of the rules. But I think this is, if we start seeing a decrease in compliant pharmacies annually, that to me is an indicator of something needs to change within how our agency potentially operates. Do we need more inspectors? Do we need more communication sent out? Do we need to reflect on rule writing? And I think this goes back to the fiscal aspect of running the agency is, do we need more staff? And how do we ultimately make that argument for a budget that would give us the appropriate staff to be able to support inspecting and helping pharmacies become compliant ultimately? So I have concerns with removing that, and I understand the external factors and the subjective nature of being quote unquote in compliance. But I have a concern with that being removed from something that we are tracking and sharing with the legislature as well. For the KPM 2, the licenses being issued within 30 days. Same thing, I totally understand that, like, if you receive an incomplete application or we're chasing down paperwork, for entities that are trying to apply or individuals who are trying to apply. To me, this is also reflective of, does our board need additional staff to support the speed to which somebody is licensed? I would hate for this metric to be, 100% of the applications we receive are issued within 30 days, but then having a portion of individuals and outlets who are taking much longer than 30 days and not having the staff to support that. Like you said, it may need to go to the board case review. There might be a bunch of back and forth or questions. And I understand that it is a strain on board staff. And if we need to go to the legislature to say, hey, we are, 100% of our applications are coming in on time, but we still need more staff in the licensing department, where are we going to have the data to really prove that to them? And I think it's also important that we expeditiously have licenses move through this process. So if we want to change the target to 60 days, because then at least we're getting the board capturing the fact that some of these licenses do need to go to board meetings. Or if we want to potentially change the KPM to percentage of licenses that require additional work, or aren't, something like that, where it's reflective of all that additional work that has to be done for incomplete or challenging license applications. So those would be my two concerns. I appreciate your thoughtful approach to this, Gary and team. But I think when it comes to this being reflective of how our agency operates, I don't want to manipulate how we measure this too much, where it really isn't showing where the pain points potentially are and how do we advocate as an agency to getting the support that we need from the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Shin.
Board member Chin has nothing to add. Thank you.
Board Member Hall.
Member Hall, Board Member Kroger, that was well said. My only question was, if we were to remove a KPM, is there a minimum number, or can you have just two, or that was just my only wonder.
Executive Director running that. I think the target is 5.
Anything else?
Board Member Pineda.
Board Member Pina, though, I have nothing to add.
Board President Joyce, yeah, are you gonna come back to us before you finalize the KPMs? Is it gonna come back to, just to see what you've done, or? Because I understand, there's optics, and certainly, things like, the number of days, it takes to review the cases and finalize them. That could be based on staffing and things like that. So that, I mean, that clearly, is a good KPM, to be documented. And the customer service part, those are all traditional KPMs for state boards. But it was very insightful what board member Kroger had said. And also what you had said about the subjectivity of some of the in KPM one, and your concerns regarding that. So can you just like restate why that wouldn't be, that should be dropped, Executive Director, and why you're saying that it's not really a good measure to present?
Executive Director, and which particular KPM were we talking about?
One.
One. Oh, okay, you have it up there.
No.
I think the subjectivity on, if I went around the board here and asked you, what does it mean for a pharmacy to be in compliance? Probably get more than one variation in the answer there. And we don't define that here. And is it reasonable to expect that if we don't see you for 3 years, that we come in and absolutely everything is spotless, there isn't any observation at all, even if it's very simple, like missing the date on a vaccine form that's recorded electronically, perhaps it's not written on the form, etc. Does that mean someone's out of compliance? Granted, all observations are important, but if we're talking about the delineation between or the differentiation between something requiring board review and something just being able to, through staff delegated authority, be determined to represent sufficient corrective action, is one in compliance and one not? Again, it's not stated here. And there are other ways to track this. I completely agree that we do have some degree of input and impact on this. Compliance through outreach and education, effective rule writing, etc. But if we don't even have a definition for what it means to be in compliance, and especially when I think of key performance metric, right? Is this key for us? It is a performance metric, sure, but is it a key performance metric? If it's not something we directly can control, I don't think I can make the argument that it's key. A performance metric, yes. Key performance metric, no. And there are other ways to track the percentage of pharmacies that are inspected that don't, well, I guess it was using the old term, pass without notes. There are ways that we could easily track the percentage of pharmacies that are inspected that have observations. So we wouldn't, by removing this metric, we wouldn't be removing the transparency of that process or our ability to report on that. Furthermore, I look at it this way, having spent plenty of time relative to my tenure as ED down in Salem. If having 6 front-end licensing representatives with over 31,000 active licensees and registrations isn't in and of itself enough justification for additional resources, I don't know that this KPM, this chart is going to do that. If having however many compliance cases we have outstanding and half the number of investigators that other similarly situated boards have is not in and of itself sufficient justification to increase staffing resources or those allocations, this chart isn't going to do it either. So it's that composite of all of those factors that lead me to make this suggestion here.
Yeah. No, yeah, I mean, I get that. I mean, the key is, how do we objectively measure patient safety, that the board is doing their job as far as keeping Oregonians safe. And that's not an easy task. There are ways to measure that. So no, I appreciate what you're proposing. I'm definitely, support submitting this to LFO and then the CFO. I just want to make sure that, it's clear, and it's objective. I'm just, it's hard to kind of brainstorm, what data we need to, pin down to show that, hey, the Board of Pharmacy is doing their job in keeping Oregonians safe. Thank you.
Executive Director, and one more thing, starting off the process. I think another measurement and complement to what we can do here is continuing to report on the increase or decrease in the overall number of cases that we get year per year, right? Because if we're inspecting for KPM3, if we're inspecting on within the rolling timeline that we've set, then all of the pharmacies would be inspected within that, and we would see the number of cases go up or down. So if we're looking for other ways to kind of bolster our awareness of, is the board doing what it should? Is patient safety increasing, decreasing? Are there other external factors, et cetera? Using the timeline that we report on of number of cases per year would augment that.
Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, publicly, there's concerns with pharmacies closing, the economic shift, with vertical integration and everything else. I mean, I don't know how much we can do about that, and I don't know how we could even measure, like pharmacy closures and the impact of that in regards to public safety. I guess that's something that is too, I don't know, if we can even discuss that. That's fine. Barbara Kirkbride?
Really?
I'd love to discuss it, but I just don't know how much we can delve into that. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Gary, for the presentation. Executive Director Runyon, sorry. I had similar thoughts to Board Member Kroger on KPM 1. I absolutely support removing this from KPMs. I agree wholeheartedly that this is not worded in a way that, like, we don't score our pharmacy. So how can you say one is in compliance and one's not? We have observations, and some have none, some have some have a lot. And I agree that this is an external thing, so I have no issue removing it from KPMs. I would like to know that this is somehow going to come back to the board, like how we are going to see this metric, because to Board Member Kroger's point, I think this is an important view, and I think I think it's different than number of cases. About how many pharmacies are coming through these inspections with observations and how many are not, because I think it speaks to our regulatory environment. And so we kind of do two things here as board members. We look at cases, but we also do rulemaking, and we've had a lot of conversations about what that environment looks like as we move forward, and standard of care versus more bright line, and how do we know we're moving in the right direction with that? I think we've all kind of committed to moving more towards more of a standard of care, and if we don't have that visibility, how do we know we're going in the right direction? So I really want to make sure that we don't lose that transparency to what is happening with the observations and the inspections when it's removed from the KPMs, but totally support removing it from KPM. And then as far as number 2, I support what you have proposed. And then number 3, I don't really have a preference, but support you working with the LFO to figure out what works best. Thank you.
Executive Director, and thank you for that input. Not only to you, but to everyone. It's very valid points there. And that's the goal, just to come up with something that makes sense for the agency, that supports the board's mission, and reflects your will as well. And one thing that we could do, I have to discuss it with discussed this with staff member Efremoff in the interim. Lately I've been combining the financial update, strategic plan update. Essentially, it's like a board report. There might be the ability for us to keep track of that sort of thing, just to maintain that degree of transparency, which I'm all for as well. Every 2 months, yeah, I'll have to discuss that to see what makes sense there. But that might be in lieu of keeping this KPM, a way that we could very simply run that data and report on that so we don't lose sight of our impact as a regulatory agency, and we don't lose sight of whether or not we're going in the right or wrong direction. So I think that feedback's important.
Or President Joyce, yeah, I definitely, we discussed this earlier, but yeah, I agree with that. That timing of that every 2 months at board meetings would be good. Anyone else have any comments or anything else or for Executive Director Runyon? Otherwise, can we go ahead and propose this motion for you to submit this? Okay. Is there a motion to move to direct staff to submit the new key performance measures as proposed to CFO and LFO for review?
The move, board member Chen.
Is there a second?
Member Smith, second.
President Joyce, yes. Board Vice President Kirkbride.
Yes.
Board Member Chin.
Yes.
Board Member Hall.
Yes.
Board Member Kroger.
Opposed.
Board Patel. Board Pinheiro.
Yes.
Member Smith.
Yes.
Motion passes with board members Kroger and Patel opposed. We doing legislative session? No. Lunch? Okay, we'll do lunch. No, 1 second. Go ahead.
Member Kroger, I don't have the new, agenda in front of me, but the one I have for key performance metrics, it doesn't have action necessary listed.
Overall, I was also confused because KPM 3 has an or.
I'm looking at the wrong part here.
No.
Executive Director, I mean, as far as the or, that is what I mentioned, there are a couple different potential ways to, I guess, to track that or address that. And in all likelihood, the LFO is going to have some input on whatever I decide to submit. So it was more of a motion to allow me to work with them to modify these in the spirit of what I've presented, rather than, and that just represented a bifurcation. Do you want an annual or do you want like a rolling increment there? But they're likely going to have some input where even, my best day, whatever I presented today is likely not what's going to come out on the other side once they have their input. So that was the intent there.
I guess the question is, did we need a motion?
I think because we needed direction from you guys on it.
So then the question is there a concern because it was not listed in the agenda as action necessary by the board? Because normally, the way we post is anything that we would be taking action on is listed publicly. This would be one that's listed. So like, we're gonna motions related to disciplinary action necessary.
But it's still on the agenda.
It is, but not listed as something that we would be taking action on.
Yeah, but I think as long as it's on the agenda, I think we're good.
Makes sense, I guess.
I
So,
think the action, I don't know, when, or I think you guys just use that as sort of an indicator to the board that there should be a vote.
Correct.
That's why they do it. I don't want for that. So,
It's an old method.
yeah.
This can be, I don't want to derail this meeting in any manner, but I think in board preparation and public notice, we need to keep that consistency in how we notice that to the public, whether or not it's required, especially as board members are preparing for something, knowing that they're going to have to make that type of decision, I think is important, as well as the public, right? I understand we're adjusting the agenda all over the place, but there may be individuals who weren't aware that we were going to be taking an official action on KPMs today. And I don't, since we historically do notice to the public when we would be taking official board actions, i.e. voting on a motion, it's concern, it's not a huge concern. Let's say, I don't want to derail anything, but I think it's important that we keep consistency.
Oh, that's a good point. Are we good for lunch then? Like lunch is here? Okay, let's take lunch and come start at one PM with compounding.